Sound Design Welcome to Sound Design Live. I'm Nathan Lively, and today I'm joined by the founder of Gearsupply, Mendel Rosenberg. Mendel, welcome to Sound Design Live.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
So, Mendel, I'd love to ask people just about music that they like a little bit before we get started, just so we can all get to know you a little bit. So, we're definitely going to talk today about buying and selling used gear and pro audio equipment. But before we do that, after you get, something set up, maybe that you're trying to test since you handle a lot of used gear, maybe what's one of the first pieces of music you might play through it to get familiar with?
Good question. So I grew up in South Florida, so definitely an EDM guy. A lot of like Buka Shade, some of that older kind of European house music. That's definitely my go-to. These days in the office, we have Rufus the Soul on 24/7.
Okay, so normally this is when I would talk to you about how you got started, but let's do that second, because I know a lot of people listening are like, what is Gearsupply? Who is this person? Why aren't we talking about mixing shows? So could you give us the overview of what Gearsupply is and what it is not? Because I know you have, some maybe horror stories that you've heard from some of your customers about working with other
the old guard
resellers. Yeah.
Yes. So Gearsupply is a marketplace for concert production equipment. What we've found is our industry is pretty technical, and they're pretty good at what they do. And they're very good at testing gear. They know how to spot gear that's in good condition or in bad condition from a mile away. They're not needing you to tell them what gear they're supposed to buy. They already know what they want. Oftentimes they already own what they want, and they're just adding to that system. And they're definitely not here for you to tell them what's considered good condition or bad condition. They want you to describe and show what they're buying, but they'll make their own decisions. They're experts in the actual gear. And you have a lot of other industries where people rely heavily on brokers or middlemen to connect you with, you're buying a tractor for your farm, and so in Wisconsin has a tractor. So you got to get that from Wisconsin down to South Florida. This is your first tractor you're buying. So you need to learn all the ropes. That's not our industry. Our industry knows exactly what they're buying, and they don't need you to school them on the gear. They know the gear probably better than you do. They probably use that gear, 2-3 nights a week for the last 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
What our industry really does need is our industry needs help marketing the equipment and a place to safely transact. So marketplace, that's what we are. We are the town square where everyone can come, where there's good observance. People aren't going to be pulling off thievery or whatever. Imagine your old 1600s marketplace. It's a safe place to transact, and everyone's there. That's what we are. We're a marketplace for concert production equipment. We are not a integrator. We're not going to be giving technical advice. We're going to connect you with the best gear at the best price with the highest level of trust and satisfaction in that transaction. So we've spent all of our time and money focused exclusively on 2 things: marketing and the transaction, making sure that transaction from start to finish occurs safely, that you're not all of a sudden finding out that you owed a tax bill to some jurisdiction that you had no idea you were supposed to pay taxes when you did this deal. Yeah. Of course, the broker doesn't know because the broker's never done a deal there, or they have, and they didn't think to ask or mention it, and you're not shipping the gear with a bad carrier and the gear gets damaged, and you find out that really used gear is only covered on a per weight cost and not an actual per item cost. And now you're getting 25 cents on the pound per speaker, which for some of that older powered speakers, you actually might do pretty well on, because those are pretty heavy. But there's a lot of horror stories of people all of a sudden stumbling into a deal where they met a guy in Facebook Marketplace, or they used a broker, and the broker did a deal in such and such a place, and all of a sudden it gets damaged. And whose fault is it? Is it the broker's fault? Well, I used the broker's carrier. Well, the broker's not a shipping agent. So now it comes on me, and I don't have insurance on that. And it's out of the jurisdiction of my general liability, and general liability doesn't cover shipping. All of these kind of issues we solve on this marketplace. We handle soup to nuts, sale to shipping to payment to feedback. That whole component is all handled by us.
I think in the last few years, as an adult, I still either get fully scammed once a year or get really close to being scammed once a year. And so recently, I guess last year, I was trying to sell an old air conditioner on Facebook Marketplace. And I think it's because it's these moments of weakness where, like, I am in a hurry, I need something from someone, or I'm trying to sell this thing and just get it out of my life. And so then when someone messages me and says, "Hey, I can come pick it up now. Can just send me your email address or Venmo
Right.
or
You
X,
just get
Y, and Z."
excited. You're like,
I'm
that's
like,
it. We're
"Great,
done.
great, great. Yeah,
It's sold.
let's get
Let's
it
go.
taken care of." So these are things that I think that aren't visible immediately until you get scammed. Then you're like, "Oh my God, why did I use Facebook
Yes.
Marketplace?"
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I unfortunately can share a couple of those stories as well. We started, and we'll talk about this later. We started just as a trade-in service. So we bought gear in bulk, either from manufacturers that were accepting their clients' old gear or from integrators and installers that were accepting their clients' old gear. And so our whole focus was supply, gear supply. We just made sure we had the right supply. And we relied on all those formats that you just mentioned, brokers, Facebook Marketplace, email, all those kind of unregulated, I don't know the regulation is the right word, more unsupervised methods of transacting. And yeah, there were a couple of horror stories. One that sticks out, we had a middleman, I'll call it that, reach out and say, "Hey, we need some," I think it was a Meyer Lion rig. And they reached out and said, "Hey, can we get some of these lines?" And I said, "Actually, you're in luck. We're buying a big package of them soon. And if you want, I can just ship them straight from the person that we're buying them straight to your client." There's a bunch of other stuff that we're buying as well, but I'm happy to siphon off this piece of it. It's a big deal. It's a truckload, so it'll save them $4 or $5 in shipping. And I'm going to pay to ship it to me anyways. I'll ship it to your client for free. But disclaimer, I haven't tested anything. So make sure that the second they get it, power that up right away. Because if there's any issues, I need to be able to take care of that right away and get them refunded and go back to the vendor and figure out what happened.
Sure.
Second thing is there's 0 accessories that come with it. Sometimes vendors will throw in accessories. And if we get that, I'm happy to throw that in. But you're kind of at the behest of the vendor. I have no idea if there's going to be cables or anything. So this PO has 0, this SO has 0 cables on it. You're signing that sales order. This is exactly what you're getting. Fly bars, pins, carts. That's your order. Sure enough, I get a call the day that everything's supposed to go through, and we actually get the full pick list, and there's no cables. And they say, "Hey, we need these cables." And I said, "Guys, I told you there's no cables." And the broker says, "Hey, this is my customer. My customer wants the cables. The deal's not going to go through unless we get the cables. If you want, you can give me a couple $1,000 discount." And it was a decent chunk of thousands. Discount, and I'll go buy the cables for the customer so that we don't lose the deal. And I said, "Okay, sure. But I'm not giving you that discount. You're more than welcome to go buy it yourself. But this is what our contract read. I'm doing you a favor. This is the deal."
Right.
Long story short, I end up meeting that customer later. Usually then for sure when we were working with brokers, we didn't want to pick off those customers. So we kind of wouldn't touch them, let the broker have that relationship. I was at a convention later though, and I met this customer and he said, "Oh yeah, we got these lines from you." And I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry about that cable mishap. I feel bad about that. I just want you to know I was really clear to the broker that this is not provided on the order." And it was very, very clear in the sales order. And he said, "Oh, they told us since day one you weren't getting cables."
Oh,
and I said, "Yeah, but then why'd you want to back out of the deal?" They said, "No, we never did." I said, "So then why'd you need a couple $1,000 to make the deal go through?" And they said, "No, that never happened. We never needed that." And it was just a made up story. Like the broker was like, "Yeah, why not? I'd get a couple $1,000." And they're like, we once had an order go to, I think it was Singapore. And the order lands there and the client says it was damaged in shipping. And I said, "Okay, that's fine. Let's refund you the order and we'll file the shipping claim and ship it back to us." And they said, "No, but we need the product also." I said, "Well, I'm not going to be able to get a claim if you hang on to the product. We're going to need to send the product back." I said, No. We need to get the refund and we need to get the product back." I said, "So what do we do with the money then?" So the broker says, "We're going to hang on to the money until you get your refund from the shipping company. Give us the refund, then we'll disperse the rest of the money." I said, so you're telling me right now that I have to sit on $30,000 a year. You sit on the money because your shipper that you use is a bad shipper, and you won't even let us get the refund from the shipper. We can't even manage it directly. Like we're just so pigeonholed behind that deal. And I mean, there's so many deals like that. And we thankfully had our heads up the whole time. So we never got scammed, quote unquote. And I don't think any of the brokers are scammers. And really, they have a hard job. They have to control a transaction that they're not touching. So they have to ensure that the seller does a good job and that the buyer does a good job. And they're not there. So how do they know that that transaction is going to go through? And there's no regulation. So it's not, commercial real estate where if you're a broker, there are state laws that ensures X, Y, and Z happens in every single case. Oh, and sure. There's a title company that says if it doesn't go through, we'll cover it because we're guaranteeing this deal. And the title company follows all these restrictions, and none of that exists. There's no due diligence that you can do. And so you end up basically, like with a broker that has no control over the buying and the selling side. And maybe they have a good relationship and maybe they've done that transaction before so they can do a good job, but maybe they can't, or maybe they get a buyer that's ready to pay $20,000 more than the buyer that they have right now. So they tell, the other buyer, hey, deal fell through, sorry, and didn't really fall through. They just found a buyer that can pay more and they get a bigger commission. Or on the seller side, tell the seller had X product, had a line rigged for $100,000. I have a buyer for $120,000. All of a sudden, I find a seller that has it for $80,000. There's nothing stopping me from taking that seller for $80,000. There goes your deal. So there's just there's no transparency, and the brokers by default only really make their money if they can keep everything exclusive and hidden. Mm-hmm. And me as a networker and connector, I would never want to be in that position where my livelihood has to come from black boxing and hiding all that information. Like sure. I want to be able to be as transparent as possible in every interaction, and to be able to control the outcomes and make sure that, God forbid, we're not going to have a transaction that reflects poorly on me. And that's why I avoided getting involved in any sort of middleman business for years. And then at a certain point, we said, this is crazy. Like the brokers are charging 15, 20%. They're not offering all that value. We can offer the bulk of what our industry needs help in is the transaction, like we talked about, and the marketing. And we can offer both of those for a fraction of the cost of the broker. And it's the 2024. Like you can do 90% of that stuff with technology and scale that up to such a high level where you don't need to have a person in a seat for every single logistics role. And you can get, the first 60% of the quote done digitally and then get the last 40% done by an actual logistics role. So we don't need to have 4 logistics people. We can have 2 logistics people. And all this sort of economies of scale that a digital marketplace offers that we could solve for less than 15, 20%. And we're still very, very picky about who we take as a vendor. So we know that we could control, we're not just taking any deal like that. You're coming from today till tomorrow that you have great gear. You can't list it on the platform unless we're 1,000% sure that you're going to maintain that status of a Gearsupply preferred vendor. And there's certain promises and warranties and things that come with that we can't offer unless we know that Nathan is the guy that he says he is, and here's the verification steps that he's gone through that every single vendor of ours needs to go through to make sure that they are going to be trustworthy and be able to ship the gear in time. And we have full live access to their inventory, all the things that we need to ensure that this transaction is going to be amazing so that when your customer goes and buys that gear from Nathan, it's just as easy and as smooth as buying that gear directly from us.
It's really interesting. And the way you explain it helps me understand better now, because I think anyone who's worked in at least pro audio for some time knows what it's like to work in an industry that is largely unregulated. And someone who starts today as a sound engineer and someone who's been working for 20 or 30 years and has, a very high level of training and education and experience is also just a sound engineer. Yeah. And, I've talked with other teachers about, potentially how to regulate that. And, it creates for certain limitations in terms of like how far and quickly you can go with your career, like you move to a new city and then all of a sudden you start from the bottom again because there's no like letters after your name or a piece of paper that says that you know how to do your job. You're dealing with that at the same time as well, but trying to create like your own, like, I don't know if utopia is the right word, but like your own little ecosystem where there's just like having a friend hold your hand through some of the steps of this process, or be like, give some oversight and make sure that you don't make some of the big mistakes.
And I think it's going to get better. I mean, I think M&A is a little bit of a dirty word, especially in an industry that's for the most part been pretty kind of boots on the ground, hands on. Ex rock and roll guy becomes production company. Ex rock and roll gal, becomes new billing software for the industry, and everything's kind of been industry related, and everyone's uh, moving around different parts of the industry, which is nice because everybody knows everybody. And we grew really fast. And the only reason we grew so fast is because it's such a small industry and you treat people really well and you'll grow quick. You'll grow really quick. And that's beautiful. And that's something that our industry has that's awesome. But there are some benefits of all the M&A action and the Solitex and the PRGs and the Claire's buying up all these companies in the 8th days, like all these big mergers that have happened do provide some value because they bring a level of sophistication that's going to create, in my opinion, more, I don't know if regulation is the right word, but more consistency. So
Sure.
I do think that we will see a high demand from some of these bigger conglomerates, the Solitex of the world, saying we need to know better who we're hiring and how capable they are. So we need a proper certification. So CTS is too broad. There has to be, audio engineer 1, 2, 3, receives X, Y, and Z certification. So we know this guy knows what he's doing. This guy knows what she's doing. She can operate this board. He can operate this fixture and plug and play. And you have that in any of the manufacturing industries or tooling industries or even software. I mean, you're, senior dev, staff dev, all those different levels are kind of consistent across companies. And it's very easy for companies to mix and match and plug and play. And like you said, somebody who's been working 25 years doesn't deserve to be the same title as somebody that has been doing it for half a year on a summer internship. But if somebody's really capable, they should be able to get that certification right away. And so I do think that's going to happen with more and more sophisticated kind of capital invested in the industry that needs to be able to move faster and quicker and plug and play. I think that I hope, God willing, that starts to become a reality in the industry. Yeah.
Well, Mendel, let's talk. We talked some about Gearsupply. Now, let's just talk in general about, I don't know, some of the tips that you have for people for, sort of buying and selling and doing their own transactions and handling their own inventory. You have a lot of experience in this area. So what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes you see people making who are new to buying and selling used gear? Like
Sure.
Maybe they are a manager in an AV company, or they just have their own small sound company. What are some of the problems they get into?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this is my favorite question to answer. I think it's important to, number one, bucket yourself into what your values actually are and what you need to receive at this. So if it's speed of transaction, that's one thing. If it's maximizing the actual dollars you get on the transaction, that's another thing. And both of those are buyer or seller. So if you're a buyer and you just need it now, we just had 20 K2 that sold to the Middle East, literally with a 6-minute phone call.
Wow.
And the person accepted it. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. I got a call from this person. Hey, we need this. It's going into an install. I need it right now. I said, okay, let me get the paperwork. He said, no. I need you to, we need to get this on a plane in 2 days. And I said, okay, just send me a wire. Like if you're comfortable doing that, I'll get you all the paperwork afterwards, but send me a wire now. And sure enough, $200,000 wired to the bank and ready to go. And so a company like that deal, was K2 that had come out of a church, that still had a warranty on it, had 3.5 years of warranty. The price was pretty close to what dealer cost is, but they needed it this second. They wanted zero headache. And so they said, I'd rather go to you and buy something that I know still has a warranty, that may not be the craziest deal in the world. And full transparency, our margins are pretty small on that because we knew how premium of a product we were getting and that it still had a warranty. It was used in a church. This is that once in a lifetime package that's going to sell itself because it's in such great condition. And a buyer like that, their value was speed. They wanted to make sure that they got this easily. They didn't care about maximizing their value. Otherwise, they would have bought a 5-year-old K2 system. And there's a lot of those going around. They can buy one of those and they could have saved $2,000 a speaker, but that wasn't what they wanted. They wanted to get something now and have zero headache, plug and play, install it into the venue and be done with it. So I think it's important to really understand what you're going after. And once you kind of decided that, then you can decide how to approach that. I'll give a couple of examples and that will answer the question. If you're a smaller production company, odds are you care most about value, dollar, price. Where are you price wise? If that is your number one concern, the best way you're going to buy gear as that sort of company is buying it through a marketplace, calling up local production companies around you, and piecing together bits and pieces of what you're going to buy. That's always going to be your most effective way to buy it, because you have 6 speakers that this person doesn't need anymore. They're just not using it. They're happy to get rid of it. It's too small of a deal for someone like us to go in and buy it direct. I don't know if I mentioned this, but Gearsupply has 2 wings. There's the marketplace where anybody can sell gear, anybody can buy gear. Then we have a separate side of the business, which is Gearsupply Direct, where we'll buy gear directly. That's how we started. When I mentioned Gearsupply a few years ago, that's all we did is just trade-ins. We bought gear in bulk. But we have criteria. We can't buy less than $50,000 of gear at a time. So if you're trying to save on value, find all those companies that are looking to sell $10,000 of gear, $12,000 of gear, and buy that gear, piece together your system, build your own cables, check the auctions. Auctions are a great way to buy gear, not a good way to sell gear. They're a great way to buy gear because they don't get a lot of eyeballs on it. It's timed. Our industry is too small for a timed auction. Like you're not going to get our whole industry looking at a product in 2 days. Mm-hmm. If you want to get good value for your product, you need to put it out there for 2-3 weeks until you find that random Middle East company that's ready to buy it, that needs it right now, that doesn't need a discount. They just need it right away. So they're not a great way to sell gear, but to buy gear, you can get crazy deals at an auction. Like, we look at auctions all day long and I'm like, that's crazy. I can't believe they let that go at that price. But when you're dealing with an auctioneer, they want zero liability. So you're going to have to fly out there, test the gear, if they even let that. If there's any issues, it's kind of all on you. You may not have the right cables that you need. It may be 5-pin instead of 3-pin. There may be a couple of dead pixels on that video panel. But if you're ready to do that, go out there and hunt for yourself. We can talk about the pitfalls of that in a second, but go out there and hunt for yourself. That's going to be the best way to do it. The most important thing, you mentioned this earlier, is if it's too good of a deal to be true, it is too good of a deal to be true. That rule is not just 9 out of 10 times, it's 11 out of 10 times. There is so many people looking to take advantage of somebody who desperately needs a CL5. Mm-hmm. And we get, I get messages. I don't know there's this one scammer that sends us emails like every couple months, and he makes Jewish names and says Jewish things so that he thinks that that will get me to oh, Mendel's clearly Jewish. Let's mention something about Israel, or let's mention something about Passover. And
sure,
but he doesn't know.
He'll overlook all other details about this.
Exactly.
If he thinks I'm Jewish, that's funny.
Yeah, and it just and I get messages from this guy all day long. And this is the second piece of advice. But the deals are always too good to be true. Like if this guy knew what he was doing, don't give me a deal that's that good. Give me a deal that's like quasi good, and then I'll believe it. Like a CL5 for 10 grand is not going to happen. An SXL for 30 grand is not going to happen. Like it's just not going to happen. It doesn't happen anywhere. We're in 2024. There is nobody that sells a car without going on Kelley Blue Book. There's nobody that sells gear without peeking at Facebook Marketplace or Gearsupply and seeing what it's worth. So those too good to be true deals, 9 out of 10 times don't happen. They just don't. Actually, let's say 10 out of 10, because I don't want anybody to say, oh, well, this is the one. And then Mendel, you were wrong. But the second thing is get a video in real time. FaceTime whoever you're working with. Mm-hmm. If it's on Gearsupply, I'm guaranteeing that it's coming out of our bank account if that deal goes wrong. Buy whatever you want on Gearsupply, 100% guaranteed. If you're not buying it on Gearsupply, FaceTime whoever you're doing. Do not buy a single piece of equipment without FaceTiming them. They will answer everything you need. The first question you used to ask is, when can we do a FaceTime? Because all of the scammers in 3 seconds drop off. They're gone.
Okay.
They don't exist. We had one scammer that said, yeah, sure, let's do a FaceTime. His voice was like, he was using one of those like voice changers.
Oh, really?
And it wouldn't show his face. And literally, I got on the call for 1 minute. I'm like, okay, I don't have time. Just hung up. Like, it's so obvious who's a scammer and who's not. Literally, that one question is 2/3 of scammers will be gone. They won't even continue the conversation. Okay. The rest will give you an excuse about when they're available and then not show up to the call and whatever. But a video call is such an easy way to get through most of that stuff. There's a couple of big questions you want to ask when buying gear. So serial numbers, that's huge. Find the serial number, call the manufacturer. Every manufacturer's customer support will look up a serial number for you. They may try to sell you on service and warranties, etc., but they will all look up a serial number. They, just as badly as you, do not want fake gear being in the market because it hurts their brand reputation knowing that a fake row panel or a fake Chauvet fixture is out there and making Chauvet look like crap because it's failing left and right. They would much rather find out that there's fake product, and you're helping them because they can go after that fake product if there is fake product. So number 2 is always get that serial. You need that serial. Don't buy anything without a serial. Have them send you pictures of the serial number. If the serial number looks weird for any reason, I would back away from the deal. Like if the serial number looks like it's been painted over or stickered on, I would back away. Unfortunately, there is a lot of stolen gear that goes around. Not a ton, but it's something that you need to worry about. That's number 2. Number 3 is get references. It's such an easy thing to do. Our industry is so small. There is no production company in the industry that doesn't know at least 1 or 2 or 3 production companies that you know. Get a reference. Like if they are in Minneapolis, we just had this conversation with me and Nathan, Allied. Nathan didn't know the one person that I knew in Allied, but he's doing work with them next week. Like it's a small industry.
Sure.
Everybody's
if you
a
had
reference
made up
check
a
away.
company, I probably would have known, those kind of things stand out. Yeah.
And if you don't know who the company is and somebody else in that area doesn't know who that company is, find someone else in that industry. If it's a church integrator, call a couple of the church integrators in that region. Everybody knows everybody in this industry. If they're a brand new company, I don't know that I'd do the deal with them. They shouldn't be selling used gear if they're brand new. So those are our 3 really easy steps that if you did those 3 steps, it's pretty difficult for you to get scammed.
One of the first things when you open the Gearsupply website and there's the pitch and it says, and taxes. And I was like, taxes? Why would I ever have to worry about taxes? And so, tell me a little bit about that, because I'm imagining that if I'm just buying and selling face to face someone else in Minneapolis, in my city, I don't know if I need to worry about that, but I can see how it would get more complicated, like crossing state lines, crossing country lines. I don't know anything about that.
Okay. High level. I'm definitely not an accountant, nor am I a tax consultant. And that's not just a liability disclaimer. That's an actual disclaimer. I don't want anybody to be taking my advice as face value. What I can tell you for sure is that if you're selling on Gearsupply, that's taken care of for you, because we have, with our marketplace status and all the tax logistics that we need to figure out, we have it solved for every single state and every single jurisdiction. The countries that don't have that solved, you'll know when you do that, but all the main European countries and Asia Pacific countries are all taken care of, and we can sell through any of those countries and buy in any of those countries, and you will have 0 tax liability. It's written in our contract. So if for whatever reason you have some sort of tax issue that comes up, come sue us, we'll pay it. Don't sue us, ask us, we'll pay it, but you can sue us because it's in the contract.
Sure.
High level, here's what you need to know. There's a law called the Wafer Law that came into place. It's not called the Wafer Law, but it's a Wafer case. Wafer was selling furniture across all these jurisdictions. And up until really a few years ago, and it was only a few years ago, it might have been 2018, 2019, you can sell things across state lines. And because somebody wasn't physically picking up that equipment, furniture in Wafer's case, in your jurisdiction, you did not have to pay tax on that. So we would tell people up until this law was passed, we would say, hey, don't pick up your gear. It's cheaper for us to ship you your gear to your state because we're not going to have to charge tax. That is no longer the case. Nowadays, after this Wafer Law passed, basically every single state that you sell to, you are obligated to collect and remit tax in that state.
Wow.
You can't just remit tax in the state without signing up and filing to be able to remit tax in that state. So you need to go through a process that is state specific. For all but 10 states, there are a little bit more than 10 states that have a group where you can sign up to be eligible in that bucket of 10 states, or however many states it is. And then you could remit tax in all those states using one form. So it's a little easier. But for all other, 40 or so states, you are going to be signing up and remitting in every single jurisdiction, every single state. And each state has their own laws. There's use tax, which probably most people don't know about unless your state has use tax, and then sales tax. I'm not going to get into the differences between those two. The basic rule of thumb is if you're selling anything over $100,000 or you plan on selling over $100,000 into a certain state, you officially have nexus in that state, which means even if you don't have a physical presence in that state, so you don't have a warehouse in that state, you are obligated to be collecting tax in that state. There are some states that don't even have that threshold. So if you sell $1,000 a year, you need to collect tax in their state. But if you're selling over $100,000 into any state, pretty much you're going to be needing to remit tax in that state, and you have to find an accountant in that state and figure out how to remit in that state. The caveat is if you're selling to a reseller. So in our industry, a lot of rental companies are technically classified as resellers. So when Costco buys product from, I don't know, Bose speakers. So Costco stocks Bose speakers. They don't pay sales tax to Bose speakers because Bose speakers is not going to be the final purchaser. Costco is not going to be the final purchaser of that. Costco is going to resell it to their customer. Their customer will end up paying that tax on it. If you see it in Costco, they always offer you the business card or the regular card. The business card means you're signed up with your reseller account on file. You're buying in wholesale from Costco, and you're going to resell that to the next person. So you're not even going to pay tax to your Costco. So if you're selling to a rental company that's also a reseller, you can avoid paying tax because that rental company will be charging tax to whoever rents that equipment from them. That's not so simple. You need to store their reseller certificates on file. Every single jurisdiction is different, but just something to know. So if you're doing a one-off transaction and you're not doing it on Gearsupply, I don't know why you're not. But if you're not for whatever reason, well, I mean, there's a lot of good reasons you could be selling it to your buddy. So you trust them. You're not nervous. You just want to make sure you're not in violation of a tax law. Call a local accountant in that area. Many production companies are resellers. So a local accountant in whatever jurisdiction you're selling to can tell you what you need to do to store their reseller account on file, and you could save them $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 in tax. So pretty important thing to know about. When you're shipping overseas, I'm not even going to start to explain it. It's very complex.
Okay.
It's very difficult. You use a broker when you're going overseas. If you're not using a broker, I don't mean a used gear broker, I mean a tax broker. So there are shipping brokers, customs brokers that will take all the liability of the customs and VAT and import-export tax for you. And they'll tell you exactly what you need to do. Use one of those brokers. They're regulated, they're licensed, they're insured. They can do everything you need to do. They're not cheap. They're going to charge a couple $100s per transaction, but it's much easier than getting sued and needing to pay sales tax in Uganda and having to fly out there and fight it. So definitely use a broker if you're not going through our platform. If you go through our platform, we got that all covered internally, and we're taking all the liability on our side. Those are the big things on the tax side. Let me mention one more quick thing while we're here on the freight side. You do not want to use a budget freight company. If they're the cheapest freight company, you're not going to get a warranty. And we, in the beginning, when we were working, would let our customers choose whatever companies they wanted. We don't let that anymore because they chose a lot of companies that had a lot of issues. If I have to name drop a couple that I think would be amazing, Averitt, Old Dominion, those two knock it out of the park every single time. If you use one of the freight brokers, their insurance is almost always going to be better than a freight company's insurance. So again, use a broker again. So I know I'm telling you not to use brokers, and I'm not saying not to use brokers either. I don't think all brokers are bad, and I think they have a hard job to do, and it's very easy to end up in some of the situations that they end up because they don't control it. But if you're selling it yourself, use a customs broker and use a freight broker and buy all the insurances they can offer because those insurances usually are pretty good. Don't use a fly-by-night freight broker. Use one of the big, C.H. Robinson, TQL, one of the big names. They will take care of you. And make sure to mention that it's used gear. The last thing I can say is when you package that gear so well, because anything that can go wrong when it's getting transloaded by some 9-to-5 forklift operator will go wrong, and forklifts will go through speakers, and forklifts will hit the sides of speakers. And if you could ship it direct. Don't do LTL where it's going to be passing through many different docks. But tell all this to a freight broker, and they'll know how to make sure your goods stay safe. Because it's not just enough to have insurance. You don't want your speakers having holes punched through them. It's a headache. You don't want to deal with it. So those are a couple of the big kind of things to avoid. And then on the payment processing side, if you're a vendor, unless you have that payment cleared in your account, don't take credit cards. Make sure that you're taking something where that money can't disappear, either a cashier's check or a wire. I would not do ACH. I would not do credit card. If you're a vendor, there's too much liability with that. People have returned or canceled charges on some pretty big charges. And we learned the lesson the hard way in the early days before we were a marketplace and had all the security measures and insurances to protect us. So don't use credit card unless you know the person. On the seller and on the buyer side, try to use the credit card. Make sure you have some sort of way to protect yourself. If not, call an escrow service. There are escrow companies that will handle that middleman transaction. Again, they're going to charge $1,000. And this is why it makes sense to use a marketplace, because you're going to be paying an escrow service, a freight broker, and a customs broker, all their fees. Odds are it's going to be more than 6%. Use the marketplace. It's all in there. It's all on the marketplace.
We are kind of running out of time, but I do want to make sure that I get to some of these Facebook questions, because
Yes.
Jim and Dave send in questions, and I really appreciate when people send those in. So I want to make sure we get to those. Let's do the easy one first. So Dave says, how do people get in touch if they have a product to sell? So, obviously I just told him the URL, gearsupply.com, but I guess if he has further questions and wants to learn about this, and obviously there's some ins and outs, what's the best way to get those questions answered?
Yeah. So if you go on gearsupply.com, there is a video chat function, and during any business hours, during Eastern Standard Time business hours, you can reach a real live person at any given moment and get any of those questions answered. So definitely hop on there. I'm happy to help. And again, all the same advice that I just gave, all of our gear gurus know, and they can give all that advice to any of you guys and can really help. So if you even just have a question, hey, I'm selling this a private transaction to a buddy of mine, I'm not really sure what it's worth. Does this price sound right? Hit up one of the guys on the chat. I'm happy to have them give you a pro bono answer. I mean, to us, it's just such a cool industry. It's such an exciting industry to be a part of. I'm so grateful that we were able to grow our business this fast. And the only reason we did that is because of how tight knit this industry is. And we have a story. We were doing a deal in Vegas with a big manufacturer, and that deal in Vegas was a big venue and a chain of venues, and the manufacturer was trying to win that deal. And they won the deal based on our trade-in. And I forgot exactly what the price was, but it was somewhere around $60,000 is what we had offered to buy back that old gear for. And because it was a big deal, the manufacturer asked if one of us could fly out there and meet the client when the inspection goes on. A lot of times we use our network to do the inspections for us, but they wanted one of us to specifically fly out to Las Vegas, meet them on site and do the inspection and, kind of wine and dine and make a good impression on behalf of the manufacturer.
Sure.
And so I said, sure, you know what, I'll volunteer. I flew out there. I come out there and the gear is totally shot. It's not, they said that there's issues with the rigging, and that happens, that it will get rusty or whatever. This gear, it was a B&B system, which that gear is pretty durable and reliable. And there's no reason why that gear should be, have any issue after 10, 15, 20 years. The amplifiers had 60,000 hours in them.
Oh, wow.
60,000. And I don't even know how you come to that number. I mean, it's just a crazy number. It was nuts. The speaker enclosures, the wood was actually splitting at the seams.
Oh,
basically
no.
every single enclosure. So you can actually see inside the speakers through the wood. The speakers were totally shot. And I came out there and I said, holy crap, this is a disaster. And I don't know what to do, because I know that my manufacturer that's bringing us this deal really wants to win this deal. And the reason why they're winning it is because they're offering a $60,000 buyback of their old gear. And who's the one buying it back? Yours truly, Gearsupply Direct. And so I said, hey guys, let me step out and make a call. And I called the CFO of that manufacturer and I said, hey guys, this is the story. I don't think anybody lied to us. I don't think anybody tried to mislead us. I think they just, some new AV manager. It's a leasing company that leases a facility to a production company. And I don't think anybody really knew what was going on with the condition of the gear. And what do you want me to do? And he said, Mendel, I don't want to make you guys take that deal. I said, I get that, but how important is this deal to you? He said, yeah, it's pretty important. I said, okay, it's on the house. We're taking it. We're not changing the price. We're not doing anything.
Wow,
we take the deal as is. And sure enough, we lost close to $30,000 on it. We sold it all as is. We sold it to one of the guys in our industry that I know loves these kind of grab bag, mechanic special speakers. And he took it all and took the drivers out and scrapped the parts. And but that sort of deal is the types of deals that make a reputation for yourself. And we had another deal actually right when we started. It was a production company out in Nashville, and they had reached out 6 months prior about a quote. We offered them $400,000 to buy back their old gear. And they call us back the week before Thanksgiving and say, hey, Mendel, we're ready to go. And I said, guys, the quote had an expiration date. Like, this is 6 months later.
Yeah.
I don't know what the gear is going to be worth. And it's Thanksgiving weekend. Like, I don't know that I'll even be able to get a truck out there, let alone get $400,000 over to you on Thanksgiving weekend. And this is right when we started. And I called the buddy and I said, hey, we need to get this deal done. I don't want to let this client down. The price is not as good as I wanted it to be, but this is the first deal with this bigger client. It was a bigger manufacturer that was doing a trade-in. And he said, okay, let me figure it out. He went and borrowed money from a couple. This is a crazy story. He went and borrowed money from 2 or 3 people.
Oh, wow.
And this is actually our second deal that we did. So I really wanted to come out the gate swinging. And the lenders, the biggest deal I had done up until that point was like $70,000, $80,000. So I'd never played with $400,000. I had no idea what that looked like even. Mm-hmm. And the lender said, there's no way we're going to let you just run off with 400 grand. If you want to do this deal, we need to buy the gear. So we're going to make a separate entity. But because you're in Ohio and we're in Miami, we don't want to have to, if God forbid something happens, fly down to Ohio and fight the case in Ohio. So we have to make an entity in Miami. Oh, wow. So we made a separate entity in Miami. The entity in Miami bought all the equipment, and we would have to purchase it, each piece off of them, make a PO, SO, and then go out and sell it. That deal, we predicted it would be worth about $500,000. We sold it for $512 in 60 days. I walked away with less than 10% of that upside on that deal. That whole deal, we flew in there Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Monday after Thanksgiving, all the gear is picked up. And again, I had to give away whatever it was, 80%. But I knew that I had a client that I could please to a very high level. And if that meant that I take a small cut of it, I'm happy to do that. And, I worked my tail end off for 60 days, sold through all that gear. Took a lot of work. I made very little off of that, but I have a customer that to this day we do tons and tons of business with. So that it's a small industry. It's an amazing industry, and it's an industry that helps each other out. And when you have that sort of reputation, we sold some gear after to a company called Blackhawk in Nashville. And it was a big deal, a couple $100,000. And they had said, we need a reference. So I sent them somebody else in Nashville. And they said, okay, I'm sending you the whole wire right now. And I said, that's it? Like, you don't want to do, you don't want to fly down, check it out. This was right when I started. And they said, no, I called this other company and they told us about you. And I realized right away, like, how well I was doing it because I thought it was the right thing to do. But the industry really, really repays that sort of trust and taking care of other people. In this industry, if you want to grow quick, besides for offering a great product, if you're trustworthy and transparent, the industry rewards that so heavily. It's such a small industry, and it's an amazing industry to be in because of that. So it is a cool space to be in. I know you got to wrap up, so let's grab the other.
Yeah. So, thank you though. Those are good stories. So Jim in Australia asked about gray import equipment, which I'd never heard of. So hopefully you can explain that. But he said, what is the situation with warranty and service on gray import equipment? Traditionally, you would have been shunned by a local importer. Are we now in a situation where manufacturers are thinking globally about product support?
As a general rule, manufacturers want more of their product in more areas. What that means for what this person is calling gray product, they would rather have your used product reach a new industry, reach a new region, or reach an emerging market, or reach a market that couldn't otherwise afford to buy that new and now has it used, than have another of their competitors sell into that market. That's a general rule. Especially over the last couple of years, we see manufacturers really pushing hard to control that used gear pricing. And that is an indication that they want to have more entry-level customers come into their product. They want to have more control of that so that they can offer proper training and ramp up to get their customers really up to snuff so that their product looks good and sounds good, and that those fixtures or that video panel looks great when it goes out there. So as a general rule, I don't think that is the case, that manufacturers don't want their product in new markets. What they don't want is they don't want their product performing poorly in new markets. So they would much rather you reach out and say, hey, I got this system. What training do I need? Let me pay $1,000, $2,000 to get trained on this new row wall so that it looks great, so that 2-3 years down the line, it still performs great. To the contrary, actually, a lot of manufacturers like to be able to brag and show off and say, we want to sell you the new product, but this product is so good that it can end up in one of these emerging markets in a Brazil or in a place in Africa or one of the new Middle Eastern markets, a Dubai or one of these places that's growing like crazy. You can sell that product there in 6 years from now, and it still will function well for the next 3, 4, 5 years, and we'll support it. We may not have all the parts for it, but we'll give training and we'll give all the materials that people need to get off the ground and running. So I think that is important. Warranty, the reality is warranty is less about dealers and gray product per se. It's more liability. So manufacturers don't want to be liable for old product. That's kind of anywhere and everywhere. Thankfully, our industry has product that has long shelf life. So, LA8, for example, from Acoustic is still, even though it's discontinued, it's still supported for the next few months. That's a 10-year-old amplifier, more than a 10-year-old amplifier. So there is a lot of shelf life for these products. The manufacturers will have parts on hand. JBL and Meyer still have parts on hand for 20-year-old products. So does L Acoustics still have their original foam and paint for 15, 20-year-old products. So you shouldn't have an issue buying spare parts, etc. But definitely something to look into, though, to see if that product is discontinued and what sort of spare parts that manufacturer has. The last thing is there are a couple of companies that offer spare parts on discontinued products. So you can give them a call before you buy that product. I advise if you're buying something that's cheaper, like a video wall or LED fixtures, where that price per unit is pretty cheap once it's 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, buy spares. Buy 15, 20 spares, because it's going to be way cheaper buying 15, 20 spares now than it will be buying 1 or 2 spares directly from the manufacturer in 4 years from now when they only have 10 of them left and they're charging a premium. So buy spares if you can.
Yeah, it makes me think about some of those little pieces of hardware that you need with like an L Acoustics DV-DOS system, which still show up a lot in Minneapolis for some reason. It was like a popular box.
Yes.
And I've worked on several shows now where it's like, are we going to have enough of those tiny little bars? We're going to need 30 or 40 of them.
Ringing pins.
Just get a lot.
Yes.
You're going to...
Yes. Yeah. No, and like that ties right back around to that whole broker, fly by the seat of your pants type of thing. You don't just need to know what you're buying. You need to have somebody who sold that product before. I can tell you, you can't just buy a DV-DOS system with enough rigging to ship it and stack it. That only works for one angle. DV-DOS rigging is not modular. You have to put, DV-DOS, some of them are, but VDOS is not. You have to have separate rigging pins or hinges for every single actual speaker. So just because you have it in a stack doesn't mean you're going to a newer JBL V25, just move it up and move it down. You can't adjust those angles without new pins, and you may not, without new hinges, and you may not be able to get those later. And if you do get those later, someone might charge you a premium. So definitely work with somebody who knows what they're doing when you're buying and selling this gear, because that will cost you a lot more money to fix than it will if you did it right the first time.
I like that you mentioned a couple of times to reach out and partner with the manufacturer, because I've realized that, especially when I was starting out and I was a new student, and people would say, and I would say things like, how do you align these two products and how do you make these two things work together? And then another teacher at a workshop or something would say, oh, well, the first step is to contact a manufacturer. And I would always be like, what? What do you mean? There's got to be isn't there a science way to figure this out? Can't I just use my audio analyzer?
Right.
And I realized later, now being a teacher, now I'm saying that to students, and I realize as a beginner, or as a student, even though we really are glad that these manufacturers exist because we get to have these products, we sort of see that as this weird love-hate relationship where we want their products, but then we don't ever have to talk to them again to use them. And now I've really started to be on the other side where I'm like, no, they're our partner. And if you want to know what the delay time is for the alignment of these two drivers, first contact the manufacturer. They want it to work well. They want their product to sound good and for you to have a good experience.
That's their reputation.
So reach out to them first. Yeah. But I get a lot of those kinds of emails where people are like, hey, how do I make these two things work together? I'm like, the manufacturer wants you to do that well. It's funny that you're asking that to me.
That's 100% true.
Mendel, thank you so much for joining me today on Sound Design Live. If people want to keep up with what you're doing, where's the best place for them to follow what you're up to?
Follow us on Instagram, Gearsupply Marketplace, or on LinkedIn. Give us a holler. Anybody in our Gear Group team is ready to help.
Awesome. Well, that seems like a great place to end it. Thanks, Mendel.
Thank you, Nathan.
Sound design.